being here. You're obviously here to hear Don Graham, and I'm going to turn it over to him now.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I was here last Sunday. I feel like I know some of you there. I wanted to mention that what happened in my scheduling was I scheduled this, and then unbeknownst to me, a wedding reception is also scheduled for this afternoon, so I'm going to have to leave a little earlier than I expected to. So I need to leave at 1 o'clock, and so we've got some time to take care of business here. Our neighbor, we have an English woman, a widow, who lives next door, and she had 4 children, and all those children had children, and all those children now are having children. And we get invited all the time to go, so we're always traveling somewhere, buying a bunch of stuff for kids getting married. And my wife said, I'm trying to figure out who's going to be next. There'll be somebody coming down the pike pretty soon. Anyway, so anyway, I had this schedule, and then this other thing popped up on top of it. So that's why I'm in kind of a hurry. I want to mention a couple of things. One of the pleasures of having written this book, besides just the fun of doing all the research and finding out how crazy James Dean really was, but as I'm getting mail from unexpected places, emails and stuff from people who read the book, so I just wanted to mention 3 of them. This week, I got a email from somebody in Arkansas who doesn't know me or anything, but he had been doing some research on the U.S. Army in Korea in the 1950s, and he pointed out to me that the Army built a lot of camp bases there, and they named them almost always they named them after the people you would expect. They named them after winners of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but they also named one Camp Giant, which I thought was amazing. He said that film was so popular during that period. I was astounded. I would never have known that. If I'd known that, I'd put it in a book. Another one is I got an email last week out of the blue from a woman named Holly Palance. And it turns out she is Jack Palance's daughter. And I hadn't thought of Jack Palance in a while. But all of you know him from what? Shane? Right. Well, you're a generation that's different from the one driving around out there, because they never heard of Shane. Anyway, George Stevens, the man who made Shine, also made Shane. And she said her father, like many actors who worked with Stevens, her father really loved him and thought he'd done a great job in helping his career. Anyway, that was amazing. Sometime back, though, about a month ago, I got a letter a 4-page letter from George Stevens Jr., who's the son, obviously, of George Stevens, the director. And George Stevens Jr. was a teenager. I think he was 18, 19 when Giant was being filmed. So he spent some time out in Marfa. Then he helped his dad when they were doing the editing a year later. Anyway, I was worried about George Stevens before I wrote this book, because I didn't want to get in touch with him, because sometimes, kinship can color whatever you're trying to research. Somebody can say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. Anyway, so I got this 4-page letter, and he absolutely loved the book. I couldn't believe it. And he said some great things in there, and my editor says, well, in the paperback, we want to get this on the paperback, his comments about it. Anyway, so that's the kind. So it's been getting excellent responses from various quarters, and it's very gratifying. And I should maybe say a word or two about what the type of book, the way I feel about the book, the kind of book that I try to write. And then I'll just open it up to questions, if that's okay with you guys. Is that good? You ask me questions, all right? So there's a kind of sub-genre of nonfiction books that deal with the making of films. There are books about obvious ones like Gone with the Wind, The Searchers, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of these, and a lot of these books are really boring, in my opinion. Particularly the retail product and so on. And so I decided I didn't want to write that kind of book, so I took care of all that stuff in one chapter called Long Story Short, which is a deliberate name to indicate I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that minutia. So I wound up, as I began to write the book, I realized that what interested me most was the lives of Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, James Dean, Edna Ferber, the author, and George Stevens, and then minor figures like Dennis Hopper and a whole bunch of other, Chill Wills, a famous fellow. By the way, I got a letter from Chill Wills' son. He loves the book. So I was worried about that, because you always, when you're talking about somebody you're kin to, you never know what the kin's going to say. Anyway, so I decided to make the book about the drama of what was happening on screen and what was happening off screen. And James Dean had a complicated relationship with everybody he ever met. And I did not know much about Dean when I started the book, but there's a ton of material about him. It's unbelievable how much has been written about him. Anybody that talked to James Dean for 5 minutes either gave an interview about it later, wrote about it later, or wrote a book about it. It's just astounding the impact that guy had. And a lot of people didn't like him because he could be a complete jerk. He and Rock Hudson did not hit it off. Rock Hudson did not hit it off. That's an understatement. Rock hated James Dean. He hated him for both professional and probably personal reasons. One of the things that I discovered when I was writing the book, and I didn't really know it because I didn't know much about James Dean, is that James Dean was bi. There are people, there are deaners out there, they call themselves deaners or deaniacs, who just, they're both their lives to James Dean. And I don't know if all of them agree with that or not, but I know most of them, I think, accept that. But some don't. Anyway, so I knew that was kind of controversial. And Rock Hudson is the most famous gay actor in America, or used to be. My students have never heard of him. They're millennials. I don't know what else I could say. They've heard of James Dean, but a lot of them have never heard of Elizabeth Taylor either. So it's a whole new ball game out there. And it's a ball game that we're losing. Anyway, the thing about the film that makes my students, when I have them see it, sometimes write about it, the thing that they do connect with, of course, is political themes and the treatment of Mexican Americans and the feminist elements in Elizabeth Taylor's character, particularly one speech, hilarious set to that she has with her husband, and these men are talking politics. See what film reason. Remember, everybody loves that. Anyway, that's where they connect, but they complain the film is too long. And I said, well, you watch soccer all the time. Well, what do you know about too long? Soccer lasts 2 hours, and it seems like it's the rest of your life. Anyway, if I had to watch a whole soccer game, I'd shoot myself. Now Austin's going to build a soccer stadium. That's exactly what we need. More traffic and soccer. Anyway. All right, so anyway, the other thing I wanted to say is that obviously Rock Hudson is gay and James Dean is bi. Elizabeth Taylor is Elizabeth Taylor. She was very good friends with both of these guys, and she understood them and loved them both, etc. But I thought, I don't know if I know how to write about people who are gay, so I was kind of nervous about it, and then signed a contract, my agent and I signed a contract with St. Martin's Press, and a wonderful man who has about 30 years experience as an editor. Turns out he's gay, so I thought, I'm good. Whatever I say is not going to offend anybody, and I was going to be careful anyway. It's just in the academy, everything like that's very sensitive. You got to be careful what you say. So at UT, I don't say much about anything. To my colleagues. Anyway, what? Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Were you a character in the movie by any chance?
Nope. I was a teenager in Dallas when the movie came out, doing the research, the Dallas Morning News was full of articles about it. People going out there visiting, writers going out there visiting the set and so on. I didn't know how movies were made. I just knew they were great. You went to the theater and there was a movie. I had no idea how they came about or who made them or where, so I never knew anything about the background. Then in the 1980s, my wife and I in '86 happened to go to, well, we didn't happen, we went on purpose to Marfa on our way to California, and Marfa was celebrating the 30th anniversary of Giant, 56, 86. And it turned out to be kind of a flop. They were going to show the movie, but the movie didn't come in. And nobody seemed to care. And they had a rodeo, and the thing that was, I remember most of the rodeo is all the cowboys around the rodeo ring selling drugs. Anyway, it was kind of the Wild West in a way. And we stayed, I don't even know how this happened, but my wife and I were invited to stay in the main house on the ranch where the movie was filmed. And so we were, the house, it was Clay Evans is amazing, a well-known guy in the Marfa area. And Clay Evans and his wife invited us. Again, I don't know how we met. Anyway, we stayed there 3 nights. They were very hospitable, very generous people. And we could just look out and see the remains of the house, the 3, everybody knows it's a false burn house, right? Everybody knows that. Anyway, we could see the remains there. And it was, somebody asked me, so why didn't you write the book then? And my answer was, I was writing another book then. And it was about Audie Murphy. I was on my way to California to do research on that. So I don't know why I didn't write the book earlier, but finally figured out that I should write the book. I did that I started about 3 years ago. And I enjoyed every minute of it. And it was just, so I just decided to make it read as close as I could to like a continuing narrative, a story, to tell a story and not slow everybody down with a bunch of academic analysis. I hate academic writing. I don't do any of it. I just try to write in a voice that people can understand, and so that's what I did. What was the question? The question was, no, I wasn't out. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about Elizabeth Taylor? I saw the movie the other day, and I did some research and found out that she was young.
23.
Just had a baby.
Yep.
But that 2 of her children in the movie were older than her. The daughter.
That's right. Carol Baker was older. Right. And the other daughter is a woman, I can't think of her name right now. She's a minor. I mean, she didn't have a long career. But she was from a oil-rich family in Fort Worth. Fran's her name, first name, Fran something. Anyway, yeah, that's true. And so what?
Tell us more about Elizabeth Taylor.
So you found that interesting?
I did.
Yeah. And she, Elizabeth Taylor really, she talked herself into this film because George Stevens unbelievably wanted Audrey Hepburn. And he wanted Audrey Hepburn so bad that he flew to New York to meet with her and show her the first version of the script. And she wouldn't do it. And I think she was right. I don't think she would work. She made one Western in her career. She wasn't a woman who looked like she had ever seen the West. Wonderful actress, but she made a film called, directed by John Huston, called The Unforgiven. And in it, she broke her back on a horse, incident with a horse. So I mean, that, she just didn't seem to fit. Then he wanted Grace Kelly, because Grace Kelly was one of the top box office people. And actually, if you remember, Grace Kelly could play a woman in the West because she had been great. I thought she was great in High Noon. Remember she? Yeah. So, but again, the thing is, if you get a film that works, you can't think of anybody else doing it, right? You think, okay, it's got to be Elizabeth Taylor. Anyway, Taylor really wanted it. And she had made an earlier film with George Stevens in 1951 called A Place in the Sun. And if you've never seen that, it's worth seeing. It's worth seeing again because she is absolutely gorgeous in that film. A beautiful, beautiful Obsession in 1954. And then he was to make a series of those sort of soap opera films and become a big star in that regard. But Giant was the biggest movie he was ever in. He claimed that he saw it 40 times. It was a big, big break for him. I think he should have won the Academy Award. That's the one thing about Giant. It only won one Academy Award. Stevens won for Best Director. But they actually had James Dean and Rock Hudson nominated for Best Actor, which, knocked out. And James Dean was there. So the Academy, I don't believe, has ever posthumously given an award for that film of that year. And Taylor, I thought, absolutely deserved the Academy Award. I can't even remember what Roman won it that year. I should know that. I can't remember. Anyway, I thought Elizabeth Taylor was great in it. And she was nominated, by the way, for 4 straight times, 4 straight years for movies. She was in the last, the one that she won for was Butterfield Lake, thank you. And you know what she said? She hated that film and hated that role. And when she walked off after the Academy Award, she said, "It's still shit." Pardon me, I'm just quoting. Elizabeth Taylor had the biggest potty mouth of anybody out there. Everybody that met her when she was a young girl, they were astounded at her language. Yeah. She was kind of rebelling against her mother, kind of was a stage mother, and kept close to Clinton. Another favorite story that I've got in there that I didn't know about is Howard Hughes. Remember old Howard, always lurking around somewhere? He offered the family $1 million if he could marry Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor just thought he was a dirty old man. He was. He was a dirty middle-aged man then. Anyway, she turned him down. She didn't want any part of it. Yes.
Where was the premiere, and was it instantly received?
The premiere was in New York City, and it was interesting because there was a kind of a mob scene there. There were all these crazy teenagers who thought that James Dean was still alive. And they were upset. And they kind of stormed, they kind of attacked the stars as they walked into the theater. And the woman that plays Vashti H, she was knocked to the ground and hurt her knee. What's her name? Jane Withers, right. She was knocked to the ground, and Elizabeth Taylor lost a piece of jewelry. I think it was a ring or something. And she was all upset about that. And she was with Mike Todd by that time. He said, "I don't know where else to be another one," which he did. And Rock Hudson, by the way, during that screening, Rock Hudson was very uncomfortable because people in the audience kept booing him, and he thought they were booing his performance. They were booing his racism. They were booing his attitude towards the Mexicans. And so at the end, he felt very good finally at the end. He thought, okay, it's not my acting, it's the role I was playing. Because they cheered when he fights the guy.
That was my favorite scene in the movie. There are a lot of memorable ones. I loved that one in the movie when the redneck racist waiter started making all those remarks.
Yeah.
And I forgot where they were going that day in the convertible.
They were just going back home to Rwanda. They'd been at the Jet Rinks, the fiasco of
when that all fell.
Right.
Yeah, that's when they had that knockdown, drag out fight.
Right. You know, that scene is not in the novel. In the novel, as much as it's just women, and Vic is not there, and so the women get kicked out, and the baby and everything. So it's a.
I wondered if a lot of things got changed in
Well,
the script from the way the book was written.
Yes, and the book. I don't know if you've read the book. I read it recently. It's kind of a mess. The book is, but it doesn't have any growth, any arc of development, particularly in Vic Benedict, because Vic Benedict needs to change his attitude. That's his grandson, and he acknowledges that. finally accepts it, although he's still capable of talking about wetbacks. Remember that at the very end? And I always say he's putting that in quotes. He's just being, that's his old self. Anyway, yeah, Big Benedict has to move, and he does. He changes during the course of that marriage, and he changes his views. The grandson's what causes him to do that. It's very.
Yeah, what was it the waiter called the baby of papoose or something?
Yeah, well, papoose and said I thought that kid was ice cream. I thought he wanted tamale. So he's just insulting. Yeah.
Over and over.
Right. And Rock Hudson, the key moment in that, I think, is when he says, "Is that papoose over there? Is he a Benedict too?" And Rock Hudson pauses and turns, and there's a long look. And he said, "Yeah, you come to think of it, he is." And that's a really, really crucial moment. By the way, I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention, somebody did this, put together these memorable quotes. I don't know who it was, but I want to thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Who did this?
It was Mary.
Mary?
Mhm.
Okay, well, it's great. I got a bunch of great quotes there. I'm taking it with me. Yeah.
Is it copyrighted?
That's an excellent question. How did they handle James Dean's death? Well, they were way behind, and Jack Horner was breathing down George Stevens' neck. He was on him all the time because he'd gone way over budget. And so it was all of Dean's films, all of his bits were finished. He was through, except he had to come back and dub something in, and I think he had maybe one retake with Elizabeth Taylor. He died on September 30th, and they didn't finish till about October 14th. You have to check the dates. But what happened was Elizabeth Taylor was so distraught over this death that she went into the hospital and was in there for several days. So that meant they couldn't shoot with her. And Stevens was relentless. He wanted this film to finish, and he insisted that they shoot on Saturday. James Dean died on Friday, like at about 5:30 in the afternoon on Friday in a car wreck, and on that Saturday they were shooting there. Elizabeth Taylor came to that, and she was furious at Stevens. And they had a lot of clashes, she and Stevens, all the way along. Although they wound up making another movie together later on. Anyway, and so she was very upset, and they just filmed her without her talking because she was crying, and she was still so emotional that she didn't look at herself. And so they did some shots of her from the back and that kind of thing. But then she did go into the hospital, so that delayed them, and then finally they were able to wrap it up. But Dean, lots of people told Dean, or knew that this was going to happen to James Dean. He was so reckless on a motorcycle and in cars and so on. He bought this new racing car, and he drove it down to Warner Brothers, and he took Stevens on a ride. That was the last time we saw him, and Stevens said they cornered one of the corners on two wheels, and the people that worked the guard gate told him, "You can't ever bring that car back here. It's too dangerous. You're going to run over a carpenter or somebody." But Dean, and there were people that were good friends of James Dean who swore they'd ridden with him once, coming down Laurel Canyon or any of those canyons in LA. They'd never get in another car with him. He just, I don't know whether it was some kind of, I don't know what it was. He loved Death Wish, yeah, it could be. I don't know. But anyway, his whole trip, and there were also some fascinating premonitions of that. Alec Guinness, this is in the book, it's in Alec Guinness's memoir. James Dean loved this place called the Villa Capri, where the Rat Pack hung out. Sinatra and all those guys. It was an Italian restaurant right in the middle of Hollywood. And so he would go there all the time and eat there, and he was just a regular. And so he was there with his buddy, and his buddy said, "You know who that is? That's this famous English actor. I just lost his name. Anyway, Alec Guinness. So Alec Guinness. So he said. So James Dean got up. He had to meet him. He loved to meet all these celebrities. He said, "I want to show you my new car." So he took him out there, James had this moment in which he said, if you drive that car, you're gonna be dead at this time. He said, it's 7:30 Friday, and you're gonna be dead by this time next Friday. And there were other, Eartha Kitt, remember Eartha Kitt? They were good friends. She said the last time she saw James Dean, he didn't feel like he was there. Said there was some, she was very spiritual. Said there's something coming off of him that's not good. So there were these other omens, and people just thought, you know. And he had no business driving that car anyway. It only had 500 miles on it. It's a racing car. It's about this high. It's a Porsche Spider. So somebody said it looked like a bathtub on wheels. And so he was driving in a gray, silver gray color. He's driving us around twilight on a highway, and this guy named, with an incredible name, Donald Turnipseed, a college student.
How old was he when he died?
24. Yes.
One actress that I never thought fit in the movie was Mercedes McCambridge, who played Luz, Dick Benedict's sister. You got any stories about her?
She was about her in the film. No, not she. Was she and James Dean? All the oddballs collected around James Dean. I think she was kind of an oddball. She and James Dean became close friends. Yeah, and she hated Martha. She hated everything about Texas. It was the ugliest place she'd ever seen. And she was living in a house with the stars like Rock and Liz. They had their own separate houses. And James Dean and Chill Wills and Rock Hudson were put in the house together, and that lasted about a week. And so Dean moved out and moved into the hotel, so he hung out a lot with Luz. And Luz was with Mercedes. And Mercedes was in a house with Jane Withers and Carol Baker and something. She moved out because she wanted to be in a room where she could drink without anybody, bugging her. But you take her roles kind of exaggerated. Is that what the part she plays? I can understand. She's that way in the book too. I mean, she's pretty much. But the thing I most remember about her is she was so political. All she talked about all the time was Adlai Stevens. None of those people liked Eisenhower. They were all Hollywood liberals. Now, James Dean and Rock Hudson, as far as I can tell, were apolitical. They didn't care. They had no interest in politics, as far as I can tell. But George Stevens did not like Eisenhower, although he worked for him in World War II under his command. And all these other people, all the liberals they all liked Adlai Stevenson, who was going down to 70 feet that year. Yes.
I have a brother named Keith Johnson, and he lives in Iran, Texas, and Martha's out that way.
Iran. I-R-A.
Yeah,
I know. I've always heard.
Iran is how they say Iran. And he's on his way 10 days in Alaska now for an oil company. Out there, he went up to do some business in Alaska. So he's just a plain Joe.
And he did what?
He's on his way to Alaska to do business for the oil company that he's trying to retire from. They won't let him.
Yeah.
So he's just a plain Joe.
Right in the contract.
Sorry?
How come they didn't have a contract that said James Dean couldn't drive a car?
Oh no, Stevens, he did sign an agreement. Stevens insisted on this, that he couldn't drive, but he was driving fast. Stevens took a car away from him in Marfa. They had some old Chevrolets that they provided for various members, and Stevens took that away from him. But he wasn't supposed to do that. But Dean didn't care about rules. I mean, he just went his own way, did whatever he wanted to do. And he had just signed $1 million contract to make 7 movies. So he had hit the big time.
Do you know how he began his career? How he became an actor?
Well, he was acting in high school. Yeah, and he had some success in high school dramatics. And so he went out and he had his father. He didn't have a mother. His mother died when he was 9. So When he got out of high school, out of Indiana, at a little town, Paramount, Indiana, he went out straight out to Hollywood and went to UCLA for a semester or two. Anyway, he went around and kept trying to get parts and so on. And had very little success until a man named Rogers Brackett, who was a flamboyantly gay producer. James Dean was parking his car. James Dean got a job at CBS parking building, and this guy took him under his wing, as it were, and Dean wound up actually moving in with him. Dean asked his agent at one point, because Dean had a girlfriend too at the same time. He said, "What do you think I should do? Marry my girlfriend or move in with my producer?" Anyway, he moved in with the producer, and that relationship fell apart. Well, that guy told him, well, actually, some people in Hollywood told him, "You're not going to make it out here. It's too tough. You need to go to New York and work on your acting." So he went to New York, and he was one of the youngest people. I think he might have been the youngest person ever to be accepted into the Actors Studio, method acting. But then he couldn't get along with anybody there, so he dropped out. And then he appeared in a couple of plays, and somebody saw him. Elia Kazan saw him and put him out to Hollywood and put him in East of it, yeah. And then he made Rebel with Nicholas Ray. All the stories, his and Nicholas Ray's relationship is fascinating too. Yeah. Anyway, so Dean wanted to be in Giant. He wanted that role really badly, and he hung around until he finally convinced. Because unbelievably to me, the person that George Stevens wanted was Alan Ladd. Alan Ladd was 5'6", but you didn't know that when you saw Shane. Yeah, and Alan Ladd loved George Stevens, but Alan Ladd thought he was going to be Vic Benedict. Everybody, William Holden wanted Vic Benedict more. He was 37. He was ancient. He was 37. Stevens wanted young. Rock looks younger than 29. He wanted young actors so they could age them. And now everybody sees the aging. It's kind of primitive. But that was better, he thought, than getting older people that would have to play. They have to get another person to play the young one. Yeah.
I was trying to think what the first movie I saw like that in, and I believe it was probably Winchester 73. He played an Indian.
That's pretty good if you remember that. He was in it.
And also Tony Curtis was in there, but they.
That's right.
Anthony.
Yeah, that's a Jimmy Stewart. That's 1950, I guess it is. Yeah, no, he plays in it. He played everything. He's a very tall Indian. He played another Indian in a movie about an Indian. Cochise. Right, he played son of Cochise. And he knew it was ridiculous.
When Giant came out, the public did not know that Rock Hudson was gay.
No.
But did the other actors that?
Yeah.
They all knew those were working with you?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Rock was within the community, within the movie community. It was everybody knew everybody. Secrets of so Rock was. I mean, there's no absolute hard information, but apparently Rock probably came on to Dean when they were in the same house together, or vice versa. I think it would have been Rock coming on to Dean, and Chill Wills indicated something like that happened. He couldn't say it directly, but he said there was a lot of noise coming out, and he thought James Dean was.
But then they hated each other after that.
Rock hated, yeah, they did. Rock hated him, and James Dean would call Rock, in front of other people. He would refer to him as being gay and so on. But Dean was on shaky ground when he did that. Yes.
In your research, did you find out who they based Jet Rincon? I've heard 2 different stories.
Now, I don't think there's any question that it's Glenn McCarthy. Yeah, the guy in the Shamrock Hotel. Yeah, that's certainly what Edna Ferber based it on. Absolutely. And there's a wonderful interview with him that you can get on the UT website of him being interviewed by Mike Wallace about that, and you can see what a nasty interviewer Mike Wallace could be. It's an interesting interview. He talks about, Jim McCarthy talks about how he says, well, I have a family and everything. I see myself as being like Dick Benedict more than I do Jim Green. But Ferber hated the whole idea of the Shamrock Hotel, hated the idea of this upstart becoming a millionaire. She herself became a millionaire, but she I don't know that those Yankees those days didn't think much of Texas. Somebody say they still don't?
Yeah.
I'll let you say it. I know you're right. I have to teach them on bunch.
What do you teach?
I teach it. I'm in the English department, so I teach a course called Life and Literature of the Southwest. That's one. And I teach a course. I'm teaching one this fall in the JFK. It's called JFK Fact, Fiction, Fantasy. It's about the assassination. That's just kind of an amateur.
Are you writing a book on that?
No, I can't figure out any room in there. There's so many. I can't see where the because I think Oswald did it, and the people that think Oswald did it have written great books about it. But if I could figure out an angle, I'd do it. Any other questions?
What year did
Yeah.
the Double cost? Is that 54 or 55?
No, it's 50. Let me just think. It's 55. It comes out about a month after Dean is died.
Yeah, we were all crazy over that 49 murder.
Oh, is that right, the car?
That was our car, man, that was wild. He was kind of whiny in that movie, wasn't he?
Whiny? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that movie. I think The Giant's his best film. I don't like East of Eden very much.
I didn't either.
Although he looks great in it, but I don't, but I've always thought that the Rebel Without a Cause appealed to teenagers who were upset with their parents. The way it always felt to me. I was sympathetic with his parents. He was being a jerk. Yeah. Whiny is perfect. But I'll tell you, if you say anything against James Dean and that, you'll get mail.
Let me ask you one. You said up in New York they didn't care much for. How was it received in Texas?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
But you said New York they didn't like the racism part.
Right.
How was it perceived in Texas? Was it perceived different? They filmed it here.
I see what you mean. No, I don't think so. I think a lot of Texas really. I think that this had an impact on the culture generally, and between the time that Edna Ferber wrote the book in '52 and the time the movie was made, the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, came out in '54, and I think Giant had a lot to do with sort of advancing that idea of justice in regard to racism. And particularly the sign that he throws down on Rock Hudson, which is a famous sign that was used to exclude minorities. And I know a lot of people in North Texas, I'm just basing this on anecdotal or personal experience, did not know anything about this treatment of Mexicans because there weren't any there. Is that what you're feeling? Yeah. I never knew any Mexicans when I was living.
Well, I lived in East Texas and my uncle, and he had a big ranch. Then I lived in South Texas where you had the Mexicans, so I've seen both sides, and the movie's two different movies, it depends on where you live.
Right, exactly. And I'll give you an example. There's a professor at UT named Charles Ramirez Berg. He's a distinguished guy, teaches in the radio and TV film department. And he's on record as saying, I quote him in the book, in fact, that when he was a boy living in El Paso. His mother, his name is Charles Ramirez Berg, so I guess his mother was Mexican, his father Anglo. Anyway, his mother took him to church one Sunday, like in '62, around in there, and then took him to the State Theater where Giant was showing. They were showing it again in that year. And just before the diner scene, she leaned over and whispered and said, I want you to pay attention to this, because this is what it's going to be like when you get out, when you leave home. So he said that stuck with him through his whole adult life. And so I think it did have, and that was something that Stevens wanted to drive home, because he had seen what had happened in Germany and so on, and he just thought this is something that needs to be brought to the attention of the American people. The other thing I'd say something about, the other thing I haven't said that I should say about Giant is that the movies were battling a new enemy in 1954, 55, 56. It's the little black box, television. And he wanted people to have an experience. He said this has to be something that's special, so that, you invest some time in it and so on. The other thing, in terms of length, they showed that film 3 times to preview audiences. And the first one, it was 3 hours and 35 minutes, while it was later cut to 3:18. And out of 1,000 people watching the film, 5 people left before it was over, and there was no intermission. And those 5 people left. 2 of them had to be at work the next day, and the 3 others were a family and an infant that they had to get home to sleep. But the rest of them stayed. They were blown away by the comments too. And so Stevens thought, well, this film needs an intermission. I mean, he thought it'll have to have an intermission, because that's what all the big films in those days did. But then when he saw that it just rolled along, and people sat there and they didn't get up, they didn't vote with their feet or anything, so he said he's going to run it. When we showed it over here the other day, I'm trying to think that woman's name. What's her name? Laurie said, when she was introducing me, she said, we're going to have an intermission. She said, there's an intermission, and you can go to the restroom or whatever, get a drink if you want to. And then at the end, she said, where was the intermission? I said, well, I thought you were putting one in.
I remember
Yes.
One of the ways I thought the movie was really showing how outside influences were coming into the family is the difference in the interior changes of the house.
You're exactly right. Yeah, the house is a real Gothic nightmare, isn't it? In the beginning, it's cold and it's all masculine, right? Yeah, and by the end of it, it has changed. I'll tell you who else is on record as saying that. Larry McMurtry wrote an interesting piece about Giant in 1996 when it was reissued, and that's one of the things he points out. He said it's like reading a novel. You can see all the changes that are going on in the course of it. You're exactly right. And the house looks like very comfortably upper middle class house at the end. But when Leslie first comes in there, it's as cold. It's hilarious when she wants to take them to separate rooms. Remember that? Yeah. I think that movie, The Secret, in my opinion, to Giant's success, and almost nobody ever talks about it, is the portrait of a family. And the way the children never do anything their parents want them to do. You ever heard of that? And the line that always gets a laugh with audiences is when the girl, when they find out the girl doesn't want to go to this posh private school in Switzerland, she wants to go to Texas Tech. To study animal husbandry. The A&M would sound like the place for that. Anyway. Yes, sir.
It's kind of unique that you talk about doing just signing $1 million contract.
Right.
That would be finished today.
It would be, yeah. Well, Elizabeth Taylor made $100,000 for for it. She had the top billing, and that comes out very close to $1 million. Yeah. James Dean failed to make out, the buddy that sold him that said, you need to stipulate who's gonna get this money. He said, I'll do that when I get back from the race. He didn't do it, so his father got it. His father and he were completely estranged. His father was one of the coldest people ever. And it's terrible that father walked away, because James Dean was gonna give a bunch of that money to the aunt and uncle that raised him. The father didn't want to raise him. The father just basically cut him loose when he was 9 years old when his brother died. And when Alfred Kazin met the father, when they were getting ready to start shooting, Dean said, I want you to stop here, my guy. I want to see my dad for a minute. And he said, then I understood James Dean and why he's the way he was. Because this man had absolutely no feeling at all for this boy, and the boy knew it. So Dean, there's a case to be made for Dean being the way he was. On the other hand, there were women that dated Dean. They thought it's all this mumbling. It's just all an act. Okay, they never could figure it out. It's mumbling and so on.
I was gonna ask you if notoriety made his personality more extreme, or
Hard to say. Well, before he was famous, he was doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, he was just total nonconformist jerk, basically. Again, there were people though who absolutely loved him, men and women. I'll tell you the most surprising person that I found out who had an affair with him is the woman who plays Seinfeld's mother. Yeah, I'm trying to think of her, Dizzy Sheridan. She even wrote a memoir about her life with James Dean. She was with him for, I don't know, 7 or 8 months. When they were both struggling young actors in New York. So Dean's one. There is this theory, by the way, that Dean was very worried about being exposed as gay. And Rock Hudson's agent was so afraid that he was going to be exposed in a new magazine called Confidential, which was publishing stories about people's past. And his agent, who was very gay, Henry Wilson, another fascinating character in the book, in my opinion. Anyway, Henry Wilson arranged a marriage for Rock Hudson. So Rock was married for 1.5 years. Do you know that? And that inoculated him. Then they got a divorce. And all of his gay friends all say that the woman he married was a lesbian. I never could find any evidence of that. She wrote a book too.
Right?
Phyllis. Yeah. Yeah, Phyllis Gates.
How was Carol Baker?
Carol Baker wrote a book too, huh?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, Carol Baker in this movie, how did she react when at her age? But they were also young.
Yeah, they were young, and she was, she might have fooled around with one of the actors, maybe. I didn't put it in there because I couldn't prove it. She was young, she was married too.
Oh, was she?
Yeah, but, that wouldn't be the first time of romance. But anyway, Carol Baker comes across as really smart, interesting, and so on. That scene, by the way, with her and James Dean, when they're out there at that table talking about it, she has a very interesting story to tell about that. In which at one point, I don't know how to put this exactly, but anyway, at one point, they filmed it like, Stevens had them do it like 20 times or something, and he later used it as an example. He would show it to friends of what method acting is like, because every time they shot it, Dean did something different. And then Carol Baker, who's also an actress, she would do something different. But at one point, he reached under where you can't see him and grabbed her in a place that I shall not name. And it hurt her very badly, but she just kept on with the scene and finished it. Wow. That's what Dean was capable of. He'd do anything to steal a scene.
Oh.
Will you be sure and leave time for us to buy books?
I think it's time now. I wish you guys are great. You ask me questions. I've been giving talks. I think I should just do the questions. I like that better than yakking. I just like to respond. So we'll do that right now. Oh, yeah.
What about the locals? My wife had a cousin who had a
Park.
speaking
She's
part.
the woman in the big hat, and she actually has a line. She says.
Oh, does she?
Meeting Elizabeth
Oh,
Taylor
yeah,
at
yeah.
the ranch.
No, that scene is real famous, and there were a lot of people there. I didn't say anything about the open set. His idea of an open set was just revolutionary, because he had all these people. He invited people from all over Texas. Stevens did come out there, bring their cameras, get spend a day out there or whatever. And at that scene, the reports are that there were 10 millionaires among the people at the barbecue scene. That's the scene you're talking about. Yeah, I've heard more comments from people about that scene.
I think they actually filmed a little bit on their ranch, and I think that was their
Yeah, they did.
payment, was that she got to be in the movie.
Right, probably was. And there's some other locals that I talked about. And when I go out to Mark, I always run into somebody who has a story.
About somebody's name that was.
Yeah, right.
I knew the little boy who hopped on the pony and rode off.
Oh, you did?
We know them for
Yeah.
years. Their family.
By the way, Stevens was famous for interviewing babies. He wouldn't take the first baby they showed him. And somebody wrote a letter to Joe. Obviously, somebody wrote a letter to Warner Brothers, said, "I got to warn you about George Stevens," because he'd never worked for Warner Brothers before. Said when he made Shane, he interviewed 1,500 horses before he did that.